Hi everyone, my name is Lisa and I will be the host for today's Q&A. We're trying to build new ways for people to explore their careers through the world of STEM. And one of the ways that we're doing that is through our interview series called Making STEM Human. This series is dedicated to understanding the journey behind the lives of various STEM professionals. To celebrate Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I'm excited to introduce our very first guest, Erin Akins. Erin is a recent bioengineering PhD graduate with a relentless drive to transform ideas into impactful ventures. She's passionate about harnessing innovation to address real-world challenges and create lasting change. Erin is eager to connect and explore opportunities to collaborate and make a difference. And with that, let's begin our Q&A.
Thanks for that introduction.
No worries. I totally came up with that myself and I didn't look at your LinkedIn. To start off, can you tell us a bit about your story of how you got to where you are today? What are some of the driving factors that led to your passion for bioengineering? And how did you become interested in it in the first place?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I've been thinking about this a lot recently, especially given my recent graduation in bioengineering. So definitely a good time to talk about it. I think for me, I always was really interested in understanding how the world worked and specifically how science worked. So I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania and I lived in an old farmhouse and I spent a lot of my time outside. We had horses and animals and a big yard. And so like even gardening with my mom, I was always wondering like, how is that flower actually, flowering, and how do you grow plants and vegetables, and thinking about, horses and animals. And so I've always had a really big interest in biology and science from a young age. And then during school, I found that I was just really good at math and really strong with numbers and data. And so when I was thinking about going to college, I sort of combined those two interests, or I wanted to combine those two interests to decide, what to study. And so at the time, bioengineering was pretty new. I think it still is new, but definitely more prevalent around the world and in the country. And so when I found out about that opportunity to study that in college, it seemed like the perfect fit. So combining my love and passion for biology and human health with math and engineering principles. So from there, I ended up looking for colleges and schools where I could study bioengineering, and ended up going to a local school, well, a university close to my hometown, Lehigh University, which had a really strong engineering program and still does. And so, yeah, I was really excited to go there. So then during my undergrad degree studying bioengineering, I focused on biomaterials and biomechanics. And so this specialty was looking into how can we use mechanical engineering principles and what we know about material science to engineer solutions for biology and human health. And then I guess after undergrad, I was still just really eager to learn, and I was still really excited about continuing my education. And so I think we'll get more into the PhD and why I chose the PhD later, but then that ultimately encouraged me to then think about graduate school, and a chance to kind of dive deeper into bioengineering and really become an expert on my thesis project, which I just finished this year.
Congrats on that. So, moving on, can you tell me a bit more about your current role as an expert resident in the Life Sciences Entrepreneurship Center? Sort of just what your day-to-day looks like, your responsibilities.
Yeah, of course. So I just started this role shortly after graduation. So it's definitely a new role for me and even for the university. So UC Berkeley just opened a few years ago the Life Sciences Entrepreneurship Center. And it's basically a center of centers, which means that our job and our mission is to really foster life sciences entrepreneurship by connecting people and resources that are already on campus. So this ranges from undergraduates who are interested in getting into entrepreneurship or learning about entrepreneurship, all the way up to faculty who are wanting to start companies and spin out companies from the research that they're doing in their labs. So that's like the overall mission of the center. And what my day-to-day looks like is really honestly like interacting with people on campus and even like some external partners who are really excited about entrepreneurship in the life sciences. So a lot of meetings with people, but also I'm still thinking about the science and helping founders and inventors not only like develop their science to make it viable to be a company, but also think about how they can recruit team members to their team and to their company to sort of build startups that can really tackle the challenging problems that human health is facing.
That's awesome. So it's like kind of a new hub for people to get connected and network and foster that entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at it. So UC Berkeley has a lot of innovation and entrepreneurship on campus already, but it seems to be kind of scattered throughout the campus, different organizations, different people. And so our mission is really just to be the place that we can bring all of those people and programs together. So sort of serving as like a guiding light for these faculty or students who want to start companies and want to transform their research into products that can impact patients.
Yeah, no, totally. I can see that need for coordination, like a
Yeah.
lot. Throughout every field basically needs that coordination. And so that sort of to build on that, how exactly do you support these co-founders in their ventures? Or in other words, how does what you do help people?
Yeah, so I think we really try to help people in any way that we can. Um, I think it depends, like for each person, they're at a different stage in their company formation and in their entrepreneurship journeys. And so we try to sort of tailor our support based on that. So if someone comes to us just with an idea, we at first we walk them through the early stages of that process. But then other people already have a team of five team members and are ready for more later stages of the journey. So I think it depends on kind of what stage they're at, but it could be anything from helping them form their team, walking them through how to put together a pitch deck to pitch to investors, or even just connecting them with the IP office, so the intellectual property office on campus. Really just depends on where they're at, but I would say we're willing and able to help people at all steps of that process.
No, that's amazing. I think it would be so convenient for, these companies, these startups to get that guidance throughout their process, and really crazy that you do that.
Yeah, we're trying because I mean it's hard, right?
Yeah.
It's not easy starting a company, and especially coming from UC Berkeley where the research is so strong. It's difficult to sometimes transform that research into a company and take it out of the lab and into a startup. So we want to try to help the best that we can. And so I think sometimes it's just pointing people to the resources and other people who can help them.
Right. I totally see that. And so moving on to our next question, I was totally snooping on your LinkedIn, but I noticed that a huge part of your early career was focused in research, as you said. And I imagine a lot of that was, being in a lab behind the scenes, probably working late nights, maybe not working late nights. Who knows? Um, so I was wondering, what led to your pivot towards the entrepreneurship side of things rather than the research end? Working with venture capitals or accelerating the bio startups that you're talking about.
Yeah, so this was a pretty recent, I guess, pivot, but I had been thinking about making that transition, I think, throughout my PhD and throughout graduate school. Um, so yeah, I would say the past 5 years were very intense, just me doing research, right? Like it's a very intensive process getting a PhD in STEM and in science and in a research focused role, but I did love it. I really was super passionate about it, and it was a great experience. But I think towards the end of my PhD, I was really eager to just take a step back away from my project and away from research and just learn more about what other people are doing. So I think going through graduate school, I always loved like connecting with colleagues or meeting people at conferences and hearing about the research that they were working on. And so I felt like this transition was a way for me to take a step back and no longer be, narrow focused on the research that I was doing, but learn a lot more about what other people are doing. So now I'm, talking to researchers that are working in the lab down the hall from where I got my PhD, and also talking to researchers at the startup down the street or even at the company on the other side of the country. So I think I was just really excited to stay thinking about science and thinking about research, but no longer, the one that was really deep in the one research project like it was during graduate school.
Yeah, I can totally see that. I feel like I have the reverse process right now. I am I love like a lot of different fields. I'm sort of interested in everything, and I'm the type of person, it's not like the jack of all trades type of
Mhm.
thing where I want to learn everything. And I'm struggling with like sort of figuring out what niche I want to head or what direction I want to head. So I totally see that struggle and wanting to take the step back and sort of understand what you enjoy and where you want to head in your life. So
Yeah. I
yeah.
think in life there's times to diversify and times to specialize. And I think like for a PhD in grad school in particular, it's a really great time to specialize and become an expert on, a small part of a very big problem. And how you can make your contribution, your independent contribution to answering a big question. But I think that there's also times where it's good to take a step back and think about the world and your field more broadly and kind of get exposure to what other people are doing and what other people are passionate about.
Yeah, absolutely. And which leads to our next question. So, to pay some more homage to Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and considering that you've done cancer research yourself, I was wondering, what are some interesting breakthroughs, significant breakthroughs in the field that you think more people should know about, um, more people should read up on, however you
Yeah.
this question. Yeah.
Yes, I guess for some background, I can give a little intro to my PhD research. So during graduate school, I was studying brain cancer and specifically stage 4 brain cancer known as glioblastoma. And so this is a devastating disease that unfortunately the prognosis for patients that get diagnosed with glioblastoma remains pretty low and pretty short, even with ongoing research efforts. And so we really do need to come up with new targets for this disease to extend lives for patients that are suffering from glioblastoma. And so I think the projects that I was working on during my time in graduate school, I think also will be a nice segue to then what I'm really excited about in the field of cancer research, because even though every type of cancer is unique and has to be treated differently and probably will be treated differently, there are, I think, some similar trends that we're finding across cancers and new things that we're learning that we can apply to different types. So I think two things that I'm really excited about and that I had the opportunity to work on during graduate school are cancer immune cell interactions. So this therapy is known as immunotherapy, and it's a way that we can, or researchers are harnessing our immune system to train it to treat and attack cancer cells. So I was looking at immune cell cancer cell interactions. So how does a specific immune cell, the macrophage, interact with brain cancer cells, and how can we understand and use this interaction to then basically trick or train the immune cells to fighting against cancer and really target the cancer cell. So I think immunotherapy is really going to be is big now and will continue to grow in the future. And I'm excited about it because I think it's really exciting to think about how we can take a patient's innate immune cells or adapted immune cells and basically train them to fight the cancer for the patient. So that's something that I'm really excited about. And then the other one is cancer metabolism. So I also worked on a project around cancer metabolism during my PhD. And I think we're all probably familiar with the term metabolism, right? It's how our body is absorbing and using nutrients. But cancer cells have a really unique metabolism that if we can identify what pathways and what metabolic, requirements these cells have, we can then target that as a therapy. And so this is also, I think, another thing I'm excited about. But more generally for cancer, I think we're coming up with ways to better detect and diagnose cancer, which then will lead to earlier treatment and more personalized treatment. And then we're also developing ways to better study cancer. And so this is really where a lot of the academic and even pharma and biotech research is thriving in, is coming up with better ways to study the disease, and whether that's with new tools or new platforms to study the disease. I think that'll then lead to a better understanding of cancer and then exciting new ways to treat the disease.
That's so amazing. I haven't heard of cancer metabolism, but I have heard of immunotherapy, which is really exciting as well. And so, yeah, that's just super exciting. I've never, as someone who's not in the field,
Mhm.
I specialize in like the built environment, so no understanding of whatever this is, but I think that's a great and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think I would say it's probably a little newer than immunotherapy. But yeah, I think just thinking about how cancer cells might utilize nutrients differently than normal cells is, I think, an easy way to look at it, right? So they're actively dividing and proliferating, and so they really do need a lot. They need a lot of energy to do those things. So
Right.
if we can sort of cut that energy supply, then they won't be able to spread or grow as quickly.
I see. And so, let's switch to talking. Well, we're already talking about your PhD, but let's go into it a bit more. I'd like to first and foremost congratulate you on getting your PhD.
Thank you so much.
I can't even imagine how much work you put into that. I've heard the horror stories, I'm sure you know all about it. And I was wondering, what led you into deciding that you wanted to get a PhD? Because not that many people go into that route or like, even think about going into that route. I think around 8%, 8 to 10% of Americans actually have a PhD. So that's super interesting. And I was wondering what your thought process was.
Yeah. So to be honest, during undergrad, like I really, besides my professors, I didn't know anyone who had a PhD. So no one in my family had a PhD. No one in my family was really interested in STEM even, or in science. And so it was really new for me. And I think what even put it on my radar was a conversation I had with a professor. Um, she was asking me about my career plans after getting my undergraduate degree. And I was like, I really don't know. Like, I'm not done learning. I'm not really excited about any of the career or jobs in industry that I think that I could get with this degree. And so she was the one who just encouraged me to think about a PhD and told me to, look at some research labs and think about if that would be something I was interested in. So I think that put the PhD on my radar. And then when I was thinking more about it and learning more about it and asking current PhD or grad students about their time, I was just really excited for the opportunity to continue learning and have ownership over an independent project. So I think that's a big thing about a PhD is even though, you're working with colleagues and you have a lab and you have an advisor, I do think it is like a pretty independent, self-driven challenge and degree. And there's pros and cons to that. And like you said, there's ups and downs to grad school. And I think probably ups and downs to every career even. But for me, I was just really, really excited about getting to specialize and getting to be an expert and have complete ownership over, one or two projects that then ultimately ended up being my thesis. So I would say I guess that's why I decided to get the PhD. I still don't know if it was right for me. I don't know if I would say it's like necessarily right for anyone. But I think that if you're really excited and passionate about learning and really want to dive deeper into a particular area of research, then I would encourage you to think about a PhD.
No, yeah, thank you for that. I think getting a PhD is definitely for people who are, incredibly curious and fascinated by, going to a specific niche or topic. So I think that's amazing that you went ahead and did that yourself. Personally, like side note question, I was curious if sort of Berkeley was your first choice, or was there a specific project that drew you into deciding to get your PhD there?
Yeah, Berkeley was my top choice. So I was so excited when I got accepted. So the PhD program that I was in was actually a joint program between UC Berkeley and UC San Francisco, UCSF. So I really loved that because UC Berkeley is really strong in the basic sciences and while UCSF is, I think, has that strength of the medical school and doctors and clinicians and med students. And so I was just really excited about having the opportunity to work at and work with people at both campuses. And one of my biggest grad school projects was actually a collaborative project between a neurosurgeon at UCSF and my lab at UC Berkeley. And so I think, like, I don't know if that opportunity would have been available to me if I were at a different institution. But I think now schools typically have connections to medical programs and hospitals. And so I think it's more common. But at the time, I think that was something that was really exciting for me. And I was excited about moving to California and moving to the Bay Area. So I think that grad school is a nice opportunity to experience living somewhere else. And so, growing up in Pennsylvania and going to my undergraduate there, I think it was just a really nice, challenge for myself too, to move across the country and kind of be on my own, but doing something I'm really excited and passionate about.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I'm like from LA, which is not, I'm still in California, but I went to Berkeley for undergrad and I thought it was such a nice change of pace from what I was used to. You grew up wherever you grew up your whole life and it feels so homogenous, it feels so the same, and it doesn't feel like you can grow as much as if you were, say, more independent or sort of in a place that's outside of your bubble. So I definitely see that. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we grow when we put ourselves in challenging situations. And I mean, the highs and lows of PhD are for sure challenging, but I think I grew from it. And, I wouldn't regret a single year, a single late night, a single weekend in the
Wouldn't
lab.
change a thing.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So I was wondering, has anything sort of surprised you about your academic or, career so far, such as, what you thought it was going to be like versus how it actually came about? Um, any thoughts?
Yeah. I would say that every next step for me has been a surprise because I'm the type that gets a little nervous before new things. Um, a little bit of nerves, right? You're anxious, you're not sure what it's going to be like. And then whenever I start that next step, I'm always so surprised at how, at the end of the day, like we're all just human and we all, have our dreams and have our fears and are excited about what we're doing, but also have passions and interests outside of school or outside of our job, for example. So I think that's been one thing that's been surprising to me. And I just have to keep reminding myself that at the end of the day, like we're all just people and we all are yearning for connection and friendship. And probably is like I guess a general answer to your question. But yeah, I guess I'm always surprised by the people that I meet. And I think I get a little bit nervous going into experiences. And then I'm always just so shocked at how nice and how I think open people are to just making new friends and new coworkers.
Absolutely agree. I think a lot of people are just out there trying to do the right thing and make new friends. So I was also wondering, how is your involvement in sort of scientific communication, whether it be through your PhD or your time at the Berkeley Science Review? How has it sort of influenced your perspective on bridging that gap between research or scientific research and the public?
Yeah, I love this question because I think scientific communication is so important. Um, so I think I've always had an interest in it because coming from a family who never really studied science or, they weren't able to understand the scientific jargon that I would toss out during dinner. And so I had to start pretty early on, like training myself or teaching myself how to explain my research in a way that my family and friends who weren't experts in the field could understand. And I think that it's an important skill for sure, because you have to be able to, in the moment when you need to be very technical, like talk about that jargon and use the important terms. But if you actually want to get other people interested and want other people to care about what you have dedicated, your career to, and for me, the past 5 years to, you also have to be able to explain your research and explain those things in a way that anyone could understand. So because of that, I think that's what drew me to an organization at Berkeley's campus called the Berkeley Science Review. And this is a graduate student run magazine that highlights research happening on campus. And so I was an author, an editor, and a copy editor for this magazine. So I kind of was involved in different roles throughout the couple years I was with the organization. And I really loved the projects that I was working on because they were challenging, right? So I interviewed researchers in labs across campus and then wrote up articles about their research and brought in also, I also like did research online and ended up having to put together a story explaining the research that they're doing in a way that anyone on campus could understand. So it was challenging, I think, to take a step back from the scientific jargon and maybe the terms that I was familiar with or the researcher was familiar with, but I knew that if I gave it to my mom, like she wouldn't be able to read it. So I think that was probably my first like formal training and formal experience with science communication. But then I think it did, like the skills that I developed during when I was working with the Berkeley Science Review, I think translated really nicely during the pandemic when I felt a responsibility to inform family and friends about the virus like COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, and vaccinations. So I don't think we need to maybe get into too many details about that now, but I think for anything that you're doing, not only is it important to be able to, speak the technical language with other experts in the space, but I think it's a good practice and a good a good challenge to ask yourself if you'd be able to explain the same thing using words that someone who isn't an expert in the field would be able to understand. And I think also it set me up then for where I'm at now, where I'm kind of talking with researchers that are all experts and specialists in different projects and different diseases and different techniques. And so being able to kind of jump from conversation to conversation and talk to investors or talk to other entrepreneurs who maybe are focused on different things, I think it's been helpful to have that background in scientific communication.
Yeah, it's super important to communicate well and understand how to do it.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe something that when you envision this like scientist or a researcher in STEM, maybe you don't necessarily associate that role with a people person or someone who's out there communicating. But I think it's just as important. And at the end of the day, you could spend hours in the lab, nights in the lab doing experiments. But the only way that that data and your results will get out there into the world is if you're able to effectively communicate them. So I think it's relevant. And yeah, I think it's a really hard skill. I'm still working on it myself, right? Like knowing how to communicate effectively across different audiences. So something we can all work on, I
Yeah,
guess.
exactly. Yeah, always working on it. And so, with your background and passion for innovation and bioengineering, what specific areas in, life sciences are you most excited to explore or contribute in the future?
Yeah, so I think in my current position, I've had the opportunity to get exposure and think about science outside of my brain cancer research project, and I think two areas that I'm really excited about for the future are gene therapy and cell therapy. So um, there's a few diseases that are caused by a mutation in a single gene that leads to an abnormal or dysfunctional protein that then causes the disease. And so we now have the ability to actually go in and fix that mutation and edit the gene, that I think is going to make a huge difference in how we're treating and tackling these diseases and developing new therapies. So really excited about that. And then the other area is cell therapy. So it's similar to gene therapy where we're fixing what's causing the disease, or we're replacing what's causing the disease. But instead of fixing just a single gene, we're actually fixing the diseased cells. And so cell therapies, I think, really focused on and really working towards replacing the damaged tissue at the cellular level to kind of fix those diseased or dysfunctional cells. And what's really, I think, pushing cell therapy closer to the finish line is our new knowledge around stem cells and the ability to take a stem cell either from a patient or from a donor and convert that stem cell into a healthy, functional, specific cell type that then we can use to treat the disease.
No, that's super interesting. I was curious, like, would you consider, or are you considering, being a part of that research yourself, or would you rather, like, as you are right now, support sort of the entrepreneurship end of things?
Right now, I did want to take a little bit step back from research and working on the bench in the lab. But I would be very excited to join a team with a really powerful mission. And so, yeah, I think in the current role, I'm, meeting with co-founders who are working on gene therapy and cell therapy products, and just hearing and seeing their passion and excitement and determination to really grow their companies and develop their products has been super inspiring. So I'm definitely open, yeah, to getting back in on the research for that. But I think what I'm excited about now is, finding the teams and the companies that are gonna do it, right? And if at the end of the day, the best way that I can contribute to their mission is by joining the team as a researcher, I'm open to doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep your options open.
Yes.
Um, so we're down to our last two questions. I was wondering, what are some of the skills that you've used the most throughout your entire career?
I have had to do a fair share of writing. Everything from like writing emails to writing a technical scientific paper to writing a quick blurb to get someone interested in a company or a research project. So even though like I did not love English in high school and the writing classes,
It is what it is.
I'm grateful I did it. Yes. But honestly, I think the other area is data analysis and like really doing like crunching the numbers and getting down to the facts and looking at data and big data sets, small data sets, kind of all of those, because it was a huge, driving skill during my PhD. So I needed to ultimately like collect this large body of data that either supports or goes against my hypothesis. But even now, I'm still, really actively thinking about data, looking at data, and whether it's looking at industry trends. So, how many companies have come out of UC Berkeley that are looking at cell therapy? Like, that's a data set in itself. But then also, sometimes I'm looking at data around research projects that a specific company has been working on. And so, I think still to this day, I'm still a numbers girl. I still love math and I love the data. And yeah, I think that the best research projects and the best companies are data driven. And so really just feeling comfortable looking at data sets and knowing how to interpret data and then using the results to kind of guide next steps. That's, I think, a big skill that's traveled throughout my whole career in STEM.
Yeah, that's so, so important. Like being able to make proper decisions just based on data. Like you don't understand, like a lot of people don't understand how important it is, but it's super important. Like to be able to assess what's happened in the past or what's happening currently and then figure out how to use that to like, level up whatever project you're working on. So absolutely, totally agree.
Yeah, very powerful.
Yeah. And now we're down to our last question, last but not least. So, if you could tell yourself one thing or give yourself one piece of advice at the very beginning of your career, what would it be?
Hmm. I think this is a piece of advice I'm still giving myself. So I think that the best thing that you could do is to just stay curious and don't be afraid to ask questions. And it could be like asking a question in class, right? You're confused, you don't get it. You should feel comfortable to ask that question and figure out what it is that you might be missing. But I think the same could be said for like career development and career exploration. If there's someone or a position or a career that you're interested in, but you don't know a lot about, like you should just ask questions, like ask for a meeting, ask what's your day to day like? Just, I think if you're curious about something, don't be afraid to sort of put in the initiative and the effort to get your questions and your interests answered. And so I think, like I mentioned, getting a little nervous before next steps or next career options. And I think the best thing or the thing that I'm trying to work on is not being afraid to ask questions. And you don't need to know it all. No one knows it all, right? We're all learning. And so I guess I wish I was a little bit more confident and I wish I just asked more questions about things I was interested in.
Yeah, I would agree as well because there's a lot of moments where I'm just incredibly curious or want to know the answer to something, but the only thing that's holding me back is this like fear of like, I guess, social anxiety. Someone's gonna think this or someone's gonna think
Mhm.
that. But the reality is no one cares that much. And and also, someone probably has the exact same question. So being curious can carry you a lot through life. Yeah, I
Yeah,
totally
I think it
agree.
also shows a lot about you if you're asking questions because then the person answering knows that you're really excited and interested in the topic. So I wouldn't consider it a weakness, even though I think sometimes we think of it as a weakness, right? And yeah, like you said, like people really don't care. Like we think that people care way more about us than they probably do. And everyone's focused on themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
we're all just here trying to learn, and maybe, yeah, don't be as hard on yourself as you are, because no one else is as hard on you.
And with that, everybody, stay curious. Thank you so much, Erin, for coming and joining me on this Q&A.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.